Let's look at the operations and the in and out adjustments of the hydraulic through frame slide out system. Now we verified that the batteries are fully charged and fully operational, and that we have made sure that there's no travel locks on the system. So let's extend that room all the way out. Now when the room is fully extended, that's called your out stop. Now if the inner fascia isn't sealed properly on the inside of the unit, you can adjust the travel by adjusting these two jam nuts. So what I'll do is I'll run the room in just a little bit to get some room. There you go. Now what we'll do is we will loosen these jam nuts up. We'll loosen that up. Now, depending upon how it's not sealed, we'll move these jam nuts in or out, depending upon the situation. For this situation, I'm going to tighten it up a little bit, give that room a little bit more travel, and then tighten those jam nuts up. Now we'll run the room all the way out and see if that seals. Now my inner fascia is sealed up against the unit properly, and I'm good to go. Now we're going to fully retract the room until the outer fascia is sealed against the unit. Now if the room isn't sealed, you can adjust this by adjusting this nylock nut right here on the hydraulic actuator. Now in order to adjust this nylock nut, we'll extend the room out a little bit, give that some room. Now hold the jam nut with a wrench and adjust the nylock nut until you get a proper outer seal. So I'll just adjust this a little bit. And then run that all the way in until it's sealed. Now after you retract the room completely and one of the sides of the room isn't sealed but the other is, then you're going to need to resync the room. And you do this by the adjustable head assembly found on the idler arm. This arm does not have a drive mechanism on it. Loosen the bolts on the idler arm and push or pull the room to align with the drive side. Then what you're going to do is you're going to tighten those bolts back up and you're good to go. If you're not getting a proper seal on the top or bottom of the room, you're going to want to do a vertical adjustment. So step one, we're going to measure between this outer arm here and the bottom of the room. And we're going to do that measurement as close to the I-beam as possible. So let's take that measurement, and I get 5 1/8. And I'll write that down. Next, we're going to, for step number 2, we're going to measure between this inner arm and the bottom of the room. And we're going to do that as close to the head assembly as possible. And for this, I get 5 5/8. Now, to be within tolerance, these two have to be within 1/4. So we'll subtract step 2 from step 1, and we get 1/2. Now, to be within tolerance, this measurement here needs to be 1/4 or less. So now we know that the distance between the bottom of the room and the inner and outer arms is not within tolerance and we need it to be closer. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to loosen up these carriage bolts on the head assembly. It's recommended to mark head assemblies to use as a reference during adjustments. Now that the room bar is loose from the head assembly, now we're going to loosen up the jam nut here. Once that's loose, now we're going to have to loosen this bolt which lowers the room down. Once you have that, you're going to tighten up this jam nut. And once you're good with that, you're going to retake those measurements. Now we have a 5 1/4 and 5 1/2. And now we're within that 1/4 inch tolerance. Now, next, you're going to tighten up these carriage bolts. Now that this side is done, you'll repeat all of those steps on this side and make sure that that 1/4 inch tolerance is adhered to. Now that your head assemblies have been adjusted and you're within that 1/4 inch tolerance, you're going to want to check and make sure that the seal at the top and bottom of the room is adjusted properly. And you do this by running your room out and running it back in. Now, when the room comes back in, you're going to notice that the top of the room touches the unit first. And as you can see, there's a gap here where I pulled the room out and then I brought it back in and stopped it right when it touched the room. You can see that gap there. This is before the bottom seal actually seals, but I wanted to show you that because that is normal, and that's the adjustment that you're going to want to check after you adjust these head assemblies. So I'm going to pull that back in. Now you can see that it's sealed all the way along the top and bottom, and that's correct. Next, we're going to do our horizontal room adjustment. And you're going to do this adjustment when the room itself isn't centered in the opening of the unit. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to measure from the outside wall of the unit to the inside wall of the room itself. So we're going to do that and measure that. And then we're going to measure the other side in the same exact spot. So the room is actually off center a little bit, like 1/8 of an inch to the right in this opening. So I'm going to make that horizontal room adjustment. And to do that, we're going to loosen these carriage bolts here on both head assemblies. Once the carriage bolts are loose, you can manually push the room to where it needs to be. And you keep those bolts loosened, and then we're going to measure again. Same spot. Yeah, that looks a lot better. Now the room is centered in the opening of the unit. Now what we're going to do is we're going to tighten down the carriage bolts and make sure that the room is tight to the head assemblies. Let's cover troubleshooting on the hydraulic through-frame system. Now, what we have here are problems that you might see in the field, and we put together short checklists that'll help you troubleshoot those problems. Now, for the first set here, all three of those are very similar in that the room doesn't move, the room moves slowly, or the room is moving but it stops in the middle. Now, the first thing you're going to check is your battery. Make sure you have a full charge on the battery and that it's maintained at full capacity. But we're going to take that a step further and take a look at all your wiring and connections. Make sure you don't have any loose connections, disconnected wiring, or corrosion on any of the terminals in the system. Now, the next thing you're going to do is check for obstructions. So obstructions can be on the outside of the unit or the inside of the unit. So make sure you don't have any limbs or branches that have fallen on the top of the room while you're camping, and clear out that room of all your luggage and teddy bears and pillows so that doesn't obscure movement. Now, the last thing you're going to do is check adjustments. Now, your adjustments can be vertical, horizontal, your in and out stops, or synchronization of the room. But the first thing you're going to do for adjustments is do that visual inspection. So let's go out to the bay and take a look and see what that consists of. So what we've done is we've taken this slide out and moved out a little bit so we can take a look at some components inside. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to make sure that the horizontal adjustment inside the cutout of the slide out is equal on both sides. So we're looking at this wiper seal here and making sure that it has good contact on the outside of the slide out and that it's not crimped in or folded or broken, any of those. All the seal is nice and tied up against there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the other side and look at the other wiper. And again, we're looking at the wiper seal is all the way up and down on the slide out, making sure that that contact is there and it's not folded or broken or rotted. Now what we're going to do is we're going to run this room in and make sure that the horizontal and the vertical adjustments are set proper. What we're going to do here is we're going to watch for synchronization. We're looking at the left side and the right side of the unit and that they're moving at the exact same time. Now, when this goes all the way in, next we're going to be looking for vertical adjustment. Now, the top of the RV slide out is going to touch first, and then the bottom is going to suck in. Now, that is a proper seal. So now that the room is actually sealed against the unit, we're going to take a look at these bulb seals and make sure that they are sealed up against the unit and that they're 50% of that seal is pressed up against that. And it's forming a good seal on the unit. And we'll check this other one too and make sure that it is sealed up against the unit. Now, if it's not, all of the adjustments that we've talked about vertical adjustments, we've talked about horizontal adjustments. If one side is not sealed up against there, then you know that it's not synchronized, and you're going to have to go to that idler arm and adjust that. Now, we're on the inside of the unit now, and we're taking a look at the seals for the out stops. So when you run the unit all the way out, this seal here is going to seal up against this flange on the slide out itself. Now what we can do is we can look at this seal for damage or anything that could be obstructing the path of the slide out. So you're going to want this seal to seal up against this flange on the slide out itself. The next problem that we're going to look at is room drifts in and out by itself. Now the first thing I want you to take a look at are the mounting bolts on the cylinder itself. And those are located on the front of the cylinder and the rear of the cylinder. If those bolts are loose or missing, you could have some play in the room. The second thing I want you to look at is check hydraulic hoses and fittings for leaks. Now, making sure that when you look at the entire system, you don't see any hydraulic fluid on the exterior of the system. If you do, narrow that down and fix those leaks. Now the third thing is you're going to check for leaks on the cylinder itself. And you do that by performing a cylinder test. Let's take a look at that. Let's isolate the problem by performing the cylinder test. But before you do that, you're going to want to retract that room fully. Now the first step in the test is you're going to remove the extend hose from the cylinder, and you do that by using a 9/16 inch wrench. Once that hose is removed, you're going to want to press the retract button several times. Now what this does is it builds pressure of fluid up on this side of the piston. So as you can see, you have these two seals on the piston itself. Those are sealing the fluid on this side. So if they are damaged or worn, the fluid will go up and over and out of that fitting. Now if you have fluid leaking out of the extend hose, then you'll have to replace the manifold or the hydraulic power unit. Now that we did the cylinder test, you're going to cycle the pump several times just to get all that air out of the system. The last problem that I want you to look at, pump runs and cylinder moves, but the room doesn't move. Now, if you remember the electrical system, we had something exactly like that, and that is where this nylock nut and the jam nuts here are loose or missing, so the actuator isn't attached to the front bracket. Now, if it's not attached to the front bracket, the room won't move. So make sure that the nylock nut and your jam nuts are where they need to be and tied up against the system. Next, we're going to perform the manual override procedure on the hydraulic system. Now to do that, you're going to first find the hydraulic power unit, and on top, you're going to find a sticker that's covering up the coupling device that you're going to insert your hex bit on your cordless drill here and turn it clockwise to retract the room and counterclockwise to extend the room. So I'll move this around a little bit. I'm retracting the room in. So if I go to counterclockwise, I'll be pushing the room out. Most of the time, you're going to be retracting this in so you can travel with it. So make sure you get your travel locks on your room so you can get this into a repair facility. To maintain the system, you'll first need a fully charged battery and that is maintained at full capacity. Next, you're going to check the terminals at the battery, the control switch, and in the system for corrosion and if they're loose or damaged. Pay special attention to the motor leads under the chassis, as these are actually exposed to dirt and debris from the road. Most electrical system issues are caused by poor ground connections. We recommend utilizing star washers on your ground wires to ensure a solid contact to the chassis. Now for your hydraulic system, you're going to want to take a look at the hydraulic cylinder, the gear packs, and the gear tracks on the inner arms, plus your cross shaft for any dirt and debris or external damage. Now, if you have a squeaky gear pack, you're going to have to lubricate it. So here we have a gear pack that I've pulled off a unit, just so you can take a look at the parts a little bit closer. Now, if you have a squeaky gear pack, you're going to want to use dry silicone, no grease, no regular silicone. Now let's pull this apart a little bit and take a little bit closer look exactly where you're going to lubricate it. Now, what you're going to do on the unit is you're going to loosen these two main mounting bolts for the gear pack just a little bit so you can have access to the drive shaft. Now, to lubricate the drive shaft on the gear pack, you're going to take this red straw and get that all the way down inside there and lubricate the drive shaft at the point of contact of these side plates, the wheels, and the spur gear. Now, here's what you don't do. You don't lubricate the wheels or the spur gear at all. Once you get those points lubricated, you're going to want to then tighten those mounting bolts back up and run the room out a couple times. That way that lubrication works its way into the drive shaft.